When I got back, I showed the medics them leaves and how they made the bites better. Pretty soon, them leaves were being used for to heal any kind of skin scrape. I figured it wasn't a good idea to tell anyone about Little Heart, being that sometimes natives were scouts and spies for the enemy. I guess I was afeared that our captain might think that. So I kept Little Heart as my own secret. I spent most of that night whittling a hinged dancing doll for that little girl. I'd made lots of them back home for my kin. We called these jiggy dolls. Each arm and leg were wired at the elbow and knee so that when you shook it, the arms and legs waved, like they were dancing. Then I put the body and head on a stick. I couldn't wait to see Little Heart to show her how to make it dance. The very next day, I made it my business to be in that same place where I first saw her. I waited, and sure enough, she finally came. I pulled the jiggy dancer from my pack, attached the stick, and thumped it with my fingers. Sure enough, that little doll started dancing. Little Heart couldn't take her eyes off it. Then she smiled. A smile so sweet and full of life that both of us clean forgot that a war was raging all over this island. After that, almost every single day, I'd meet up with Little Heart so I could share my K-rations with her. After a time, I'd take along extra food so she could take some back to her people. She never tried to talk to me. I suspect that she didn't know English. I'd seen a lot of kids over here that were shell-shocked by all the fighting around them, and they just plain stopped talking, laughing, or playing. All I knew was that I needed to see that little thing as often as I could. Somehow, looking at her made all of the combat make some sort of sense. I felt like I was doing all this warring for her, for kids just like her. One day, when I showed up at our spot, Little Heart wasn't there. I got real scared and sick inside at the thought that she might have come to harm. So I toted my pack full of my usual load of K-rations and set out for her village. When I stumbled into her village with the food, no one was there. Then Little Heart ran out of a fallen down hut and hugged my legs. Next, women, old men, and children poured out of their huts. Little Heart pulled me into hers. There, settin' in a hammock, was a very old man that looked weary and spent. "So, you must be Tucky Joe. I'm Louis Sabala," he said as he smiled. "You can speak English?" I said, surprised-like. "Of course I can. I learned it in school," he smiled. Turns out that he was the onlyest one that could. "You have been very kind to my granddaughter," he added as he motioned to Little Heart. I smiled at her. "She's an angel, all right. Doesn't say much, though," I said. "She hasn't spoken since she saw her mother killed by soldiers. Her father and brother were taken." His voice trailed off. "Your name is the only thing she says." "Do you folks see a lot of soldiers around here?" I asked, trying to gauge where enemy troops might be. "No," he answered. "We were grateful to see them leave. We don't know where they are. They took all of our young men and food. Now we are starving," the old man said as he cried. "But you got a river right here. There must be a lot of fish in it," I said. "They took all of our nets and fishing baskets. We have no way of getting fish out of the river," he answered. I thought for a minute. "Have your womenfolk line the shore tonight, right at dusk. I promise you, there will be fish. More fish than you can eat," I called out as I ran for camp. That evening, I waited till the sun started setting. I sneaked to the ordnance shed and got me an armload of dynamite and fuses and a charge box. I made my way to the river's edge just north of the village. I assembled a bundle of dynamite and set a long line of fuse and swam it out to a group of rocks in the center of the river. Swam back to the shore and connected the fuse lines to the charger. I waited till I could see the womenfolk line the shore. I set the magneto and pushed the plunger down. Boom, boom, boom. The water commenced to boil, then shot straight up in the air. Fish started falling out of the sky. They landed all over the bank. Women and children were running back and forth, gathering them up and putting them into their baskets. They were laughing and singing as they did it. From that day on, they called me that boy who made it rain fish. They feasted on them fish for days. What they couldn't eat right away, they dried and preserved. I even shot a water buffalo and butchered it for 'em so's they'd have fresh meat. The whole focus of my life came to providing for them people. That is, when I wasn't out on recons and fighting the war. After a time, I told my sergeant about the village folks. He reckoned since they hated the enemy as much as we did, they weren't spies. So he let the children come up to the fence line and even gave them supplies that were being airlifted into us on the landing strip we built. Little Heart was my constant shadow. Almost everywhere I went, except for combat missions, she was right behind me. Whenever I went to her village, it felt like I was home, surrounded by my kinfolk. Everybody in my outfit had grown to love 'em too. Then one day my unit was rousted from a sound sleep earlier than usual. "Enemy troops are headed this way," the sergeant barked. "High Command has ordered firebombing of the jungle all around us, so we have to evacuate," he added. "Get up! Get up! We're bombing the jungle," he barked as he ran from tent to tent. "Sarge, what about Little Heart? The villagers?" I called, out in pure panic. "Ain't got time, kid. Ain't got time to save 'em," the Sarge whispered. "Sarge, if I run as fast as I can and gather 'em up and bring 'em here, can we evacuate them with our troops?" I begged him. The Sarge nodded his permission, and I took off running. I ran so hard and fast, I could taste blood in the back of my throat. I arrived just in time, and they all followed me back to the base. Some of the boys in my outfit picked them up and threw them into the back of the transport trucks. Little Heart was in my arms and hugging me as hard as she could. The bombs were screaming into the jungle right behind us. Everywhere we looked, there was fire. "Tucky Joe! Tucky Joe!" she cried as she hugged me even tighter. I had to peel her off of me and throw her into a transport truck. She screamed and screamed. I expect she only really felt safe with me. Now, I was taking that away from her. I started sobbing, and she reached for me and tried to jump out of the truck. "No, Little Heart, you gotta go. You gotta go," I sputtered. Then the truck rolled out with a jerk. Her grandpa held her back as she screamed my name. That's the last time I ever saw that little girl. Finally, the war ended and I came home to Kentucky. I had been wounded several times, but came home in one piece. I ended up marrying up with my darling Freda. We moved to Marshall, Michigan, bought a farm, and raised a family together. She gave me 8 beautiful children. We've been married for nigh on 65 years now. I have 24 grandchildren, 28 great-grandchildren, and even 1 great-great-grandchild. But in all these years, I don't think a day has passed that my mind didn't fall on thoughts of little Heart and set to wondering about her. Now, like a lot of old soldiers, I've been getting sick a lot these days, spending much of my time at the Veterans Hospital Clinic over to Battle Creek way. Freda tried to get me in to see the specialist that could help me, but there was such a waiting list, we never seemed to be able to see him. I just seemed to be getting worse and worse. What was real hard to take was that my eyesight and hearing was all but gone. Couldn't afford one of them newfangled hearing aids, and eye surgery was expensive. Couldn't pay for it. Then one day, on one of my routine visits to the Veterans Administration, a new nurse came into the room. She was soft and gentle and seemed to really care. She had my thick file in her hand. She opened it and studied it closely. "Is this a photo of you when you were enlisted?" she asked as she showed me an old wrinkled picture. "You were very handsome," she said as she smiled. "Yeah, that's my Johnny," Freda whispered as she stroked my head. "I have some new medicine for you today, Mr. Wallen. This will be a lot better than what you are using now," she said as she examined me. "I've had a meeting with the specialists, and they have agreed to take your case. You need very specific medicines for your heart condition. They have prescribed the finest for you to take," she said as she listened to my heart. "How much is all of this going to cost?" Freda asked. "It's all being taken care of," the nurse said as she held Freda's hands. "And how did you ever get Johnny in to see the specialists? We've been on a waiting list for what seems like years. We finally gave up hope," Freda cried. "Why you doing this for me, girlie?" I asked as I searched the nurse's face. "Because I'm taking care of you now, just like you did so many years ago for me." Then she leaned into my face. "Tucky Joe will only have the best. Only the best for you, Tucky Joe." The nurse whispered as tears rolled down her cheeks. She rolled up her sleeve and showed a birthmark on her arm. It was shaped like a perfect heart.